Folks, welcome home. Yet another edition of the Tell Me a Story. Here we are at the magnificent Shakers in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and we have a very unusual group of people today.
Eclectic.
Well, yeah, it's eclectic as well. So, as opposed to the normal players, we have other guests in tonight, and we're going to talk about a myriad of different concepts. And some of those could be quantum mechanics, and some of those could be, I don't know, horse racing, and some could be just like bloviating about cigars and booze. So, welcome home. Very good to have you here. We have Rick with us, we have Evan, and we have Emma. This is Emma's first experience and exposure to us on camera.
Poor girl.
Good to have you, Emma.
Thank you.
So, we're very informal at these things, and we hope you enjoy the concept. Most importantly, we're here just to, indulge in different spirits. We have this lovely Moet champagne right now. And, of course, we have cigars of our own machinations and choosing, or I chose for you. So, Emma, since you're brand new with us, why don't you tell us what you do?
I ride horses for a living, or used to. Specifically show jumpers and hunters, which is kind of only a US thing, but yeah, it's been something I've done for forever. I got my first pony for my first birthday.
Aww.
I know, he's the best. And then when I was like 5 or 6, I started riding ponies for people, and that was kind of it from there, I guess, pretty much.
It's pretty darn cool.
When did you start formally training for dressage and jumping and all that fun things?
So I started riding...
fun things. I am Greek, okay. So I'm allowed to say something wrong occasionally.
So there's all sorts of disciplines, and I tried to do all of it a little bit for a while. So I started out in the hunter-junker world, and then I decided by the time I was in like 3rd-ish grade that I wanted to do some other things. So my family owns a rodeo company, so we had ranch horses that we did ranch work, like reining, working cow kind of stuff. We did that. And then I got bored of that and decided that I was ready to do the hunter-jumper thing again. So I would say riding for people, for hunter-jumpers, like 13-ish, 14, probably.
Oh, wow.
What do you look for in a horse for a hunter jumper? What are the characteristics do you look for?
So it's 2 very different things. Right now, in the show jumpers, what we're looking for is something that's super fast and small so that they can do really, really tight turns and be super explosive off the ground. Course designing is kind of changing, and so they're looking for things that are more technical. So we're looking for the more well-rounded sport horse that can also jump really big jumps, where they used to just do horses that were huge, and the whole point was to just get over something huge and wide. And then in the hunter horses, we're looking for something very specific. They have to have a very specific demeanor, which is super relaxed, very confident. They have to be beautiful. You want them kind of fat and round and small. And then they have to carry their head very kind of low and long, where the jumpers, you want them a little bit up in your face. So they kind of are the exact opposite looking horses, long and fat versus super athletic, short, cat-like a little bit.
How long does it take to train on a jumper horse?
I would say that they're always learning, just like people. So even if they've had like a long career, they're continuing to learn things. But typically we start them at 3. They start horse showing at 4. They're successful and like what you would say made up-ish by 8. So 4 or 5 years for them to be competitive and going.
So, Rick, you have some experience growing up around horses as well, right?
I did, yeah. I spent about 4 or 5 years on a horse farm in Lexington, Kentucky. Raised thoroughbred horses. My best friend ran a horse in the Kentucky Derby. His name was Going Straight. Unfortunately, it came last.
But it went straight.
But we would typically have 60 horses on the farm.
Oh my!
And every spring, with 10 or 20 colts.
So when you say that you ran horses for people, what does that mean?
So people have us ride their horses more than they ride their horses to prepare them for the horse show.
Okay.
So if you're at a horse show, we have Mondays off. We ride Tuesday, Wednesday.
Okay.
The horse shows with us Thursday, Friday, and then the horse is ready for its owner, amateur or kid, for Saturday, Sunday.
I see. So in this case, Evan, the Greek financier, has a stable of horses that he parks with you.
Yep.
And then you're responsible for the care, the upkeep, and the educational process to get the condition ready to rock and roll, right?
Yep.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. And some people choose to never ride their horses. There's a woman who owns a lot of hunters named Dr. Betsy. She owns a huge number of horses. She does not show them. And some people are very hands-on and want to show their horses and be a big part of the process. But
So do you have a preference as to which you'd rather work for? Those people that want to ride them as well and show them, or those people that just want to have this incredible stable?
it depends on the people. But I think in the perfect world, I think it'd be the best if I had a string of horses that were mine and mine only for me to ride in horse show. Just because sometimes bad habits can come into play. So it's nice when you work from the very ground up and you're the only person who's dealt with them, because you get very connected and close, and there's a very trusting sort of relationship.
What drew you to horses? And
My dad's a
wanting to ride?
horse trainer for a living. Partially, that's part of his job, is being in horses. And then, I don't know, they were just like my home. My pony was literally my best friend of all life, still is. And so, they're just great animals to be around, and they make you feel good about yourself, and they make you work super hard, and they make you learn and be a good person, and I kind of like that about them, it's pretty.
My one objection is, like you said before, that horses always learn like people. I know people who never learn, but that's my own objection.
Well, I have friends who have multiple Ferraris and they don't drive them. They sit there, they collect them, they might sell some of them, they buy others. And I think that's in so many ways disingenuous, because it's nice that you are able to afford these things, but you don't participate in what they are.
Yeah, what's the point of having
And
it?
if I had horses, I'd want to ride the horses to the best of my ability, at least,
Yeah.
right?
It's the collector's sentiment versus the aficionado sentiment, I guess.
So for years, we have been brought up in America to think about Kentucky as being the holy grail, whether it's the bluegrass or just something in the air that's there, for being the place for refining horses, for horses to be bred from, and whatever. Is that factual today?
For thoroughbreds, absolutely. Absolutely.
Why?
For racehorses.
For racehorses, absolutely. I think I'm not really sure. I mean, I don't know. They grow up in a really great sort of life, and that they spend a large amount of their early years on grass with their friends.
They are treated extremely well and taken care of very well.
Yeah.
That's the pride of Kentucky, really, especially Lexington. We were on Old Frankfort Pike, which pretty much had all the major horse farms along that line, and they were beautiful. I mean,
But why not California? Why not somewhere else?
that's a great question, but you want to race horses where it's competitive and you want to be in the limelight of that area.
Well, I think about whiskey, for example, because of course that's part of my industry, but you think about the Japanese have really perfected Scotch whiskey. So back in the 50s, they went to Scotland and they made the right contractual deals with the best distillers and the best whiskey makers, and then they also bought up large tracts of peat, and which is very integral, of course, to the operation. And they bought the right stills, and they went to France and had these stills made the right way, these open process alembic stills, and they shipped them to Japan. And they spent, now at that point, 70 years perfecting Scotch whiskey, which in many ways is as good, they say, like to think, as anything out of Scotland. So why not the same with horses?
I think you hit the nail here. They spent 70 years.
Okay.
So that's what it takes to develop a school.
Okay.
And it's like training athletes. Some areas in the world are good for, pole jumpers, and some areas in the world are good. It's because you create a tradition, you create a school, you attract the right people because the school is there. So in order to take that and impart it to another part of the world, you can do it. But again, it will take 70 years.
Well, that's fine, but there's an awful lot of money in other parts of the world as well. You look at the Middle East as well. It's got some phenomenal horses, right?
And they do, and there are schools of, there are similar schools like, for thoroughbreds in the Middle East, and there are similar schools in the UK. But in the US, that is Kentucky.
Well, we're drinking champagne, and this is an actual champagne, and this is from Reims in France, one of the oldest houses in France, and it's Method Champenois. And yet, there are any number of other things that take place in the world that are now Method Champenois, the same great formulation, and they've gone to UC Davis, which is the place to get winemakers for enology, and they studied in France, in Champagne, and then they've opened up things in other places, whether it's Tasmania, and throughout South America, whatever the case might be, but it's not the same as France. Does that mean that those horses that are coming out of Kentucky are superior to anything else in the world?
No.
Okay.
No, it does not.
No.
You're seeing diversification, right? And you're seeing a lot of things happening where people are investing, and it's investments, right? You invest in a horse, and that happens everywhere across the globe right now. And you see the horses that are running in the Derby, Preakness, Belmont now that are from everywhere.
Chither and Yan, okay.
And that's...
And speaking of the Middle East, some of the biggest purses and they're attracting some of the best horses are in the Middle East.
I do think that it is like a little bit of a numbers game too, in that there's not many places in America that have good enough and enough farmland because horses eat nonstop,
Right.
and they don't eat like cows where you can throw a bunch of cattle on a cornfield and they're fine.
Sure.
Kentucky has some of the best grass. Plus, you're breeding, which is a lot of people's issue with the horse industry, is that you're breeding outrageous numbers, and if you put a lot of money and you just continue to do a lot of breeding, at some point you're probably going to come up with something exceptional. And so all of these people have flocked to Kentucky. And so all of these exceptional horses are coming out of Kentucky because they're breeding so many. So maybe it's 2% of good horses are coming out of Kentucky, but it's that 2% because there's the whole 98% that's still there, doing something and being mildly mediocre.
Well,
Sorry.
Please, go ahead.
If you allow me the analogy with the champagne or the wine, wine is dependent on what we call terroir.
Terroir, of
Dependent
course.
on the ground, on the soil, on the water, and these are things that don't move.
Mm-hmm.
While breeding horses is depending on animals that have 4 legs and by definition move. So I think what concentrates in Kentucky is not the specific breeds or the specific DNA of the horses in Kentucky per se, because that can be purchased. Oops, there we go. Lovely. So that can be purchased and moved around, but I think it's more the concentration of the talent. Of the talent of the training talent and the schools and everything.
I think when you look at horses, DNA is everything, and coming from a thoroughbred line, a history of racehorses that have been successful, that DNA is extremely important.
Well, I'm not disputing that, but when I'm saying that DNA moves around the world.
It does.
I mean, you can buy a sperm of Kentucky horses in Japan if you want to. So
Well, what about this? So obviously there are significant parts of the world that are still very misogynistic. So in many ways, America is heads and tails above a lot of things. And I have met several women that are very heavily into horses and either participatory in the jumping characteristic or riding them or whatever the case might be. And I've got to imagine that has to be an incredible rarity in other parts of the world.
It's huge in Europe, but other than that, and South America is pretty big.
Okay.
Yeah, pretty much anywhere else doesn't have nobody has great teams of people outside of Europe, America, and South America usually.
Aside from that, in the animal kingdom itself, there seems to be this balance that takes place, right?
Communication is a key, and that in itself is a form of intelligence that we have historically underestimated across the animal kingdom. So it's a form of intelligence.
Yes, it is a form of intelligence. But does this bestow?
Does an animal have a soul?
Precisely.
Wait, before we do that, what about the art of war, for God's sakes? Because warfare is predicated upon our desire to dominate and to destroy other things, right?
Of course.
Right. So as you see the animal kingdom, they have this stasis. They've got this ability to work things out amongst themselves. And thank you. And they will at some point decide that gazelle's got to go. It's just the way it is, right? Survival of the fittest. So now we think about our impact for domesticating things, or our attempts to domesticate things, to the degree that we are negating their natural instinct and perhaps their intelligence, which is in a different level than ours, going back to that horse that allows that rider to ride him and to guide him through the steeples or the whatever the jumps might be. So it doesn't mean that we're necessarily better, though we think that we're better, right? But we are in control of other things, armaments or something else. But again, you could take that and extract that, and then you can extrapolate beyond that extraction and go into how we deal with other people in other places, other societies, other cultures, whatever the case might be, and how we're going to destroy them, right?
The problem with that is we're so closed-minded, and that leads us into situations we find ourselves in.
That's one interpretation. Again, we're not the experts here. There are people who dedicated their entire life living in jungles and
Sure. So you got like LSB Leakey that's out there, or Jane Goodall that spend their entire life out there, whomever it might be. So we allow them to work on the presumption that they are experts because they spend a ton of time doing something.
Correct.
Right? But predicated upon what that natural environment has been for that silverback ape for the last 400,000 years, we're just a blip in time, and yet we consider ourselves to be experts on their behavior and what they do. But every time that we interact with them, we've made a shift in how they interact with each other, just like those horses that you work with.
But the expert will be the first one to tell you that we're learning, we don't know. The expert just knows better than
Well, follow the
the
money
rest of the
because
human beings.
they're just more adept at being able to actualize the money and to generate revenue predicated upon that. Whether they're working on whatever thesis they've got at the moment, or the book deals, their movie deals, or something else, that's how that all gloms together. They're not. I don't think that people are altruistic as you want to think that they are because they're studying animals.
Did I say altruistic?
No, I'm the one who brought that up.
I never said that. I said that they are the experts.
Well, you're the financer, so
Expertise can be bought. I never said that expertise is altruistic per se, even though expertise can be altruistic.
well, our
but it's not per
definition.
se altruistic.
Our definition of that can be acquired, purchased, whatever the case might be. Sure. But again, so are we dealing with that horse on a one-to-one basis with that, the spirit, the soul of the animal, if you want to take that through its paces, that we have a partnership with that animal? Or are we just somewhere completely oblivious and don't really care about that portion? As long as it jumps when you want it to, and it runs when you want it to, and it creates that whatever the Kentucky Derby gets us for revenue off that. I mean, how do we really define our role as, if you want to say stewards, and I just say that lightly, but how do we define our role then in relation to them, the rest of the animal kingdom? Because we're part of it.
Is that we are the plague, and we are the cockroach of this planet. And humankind is going to destroy this planet.
I concur, but there's a different thing to look at as well, because how we define animals is not how we define yeast spores or something else, fungus.
We can
And the
talk
biggest
about altruism and everything else, but bottom line is people have been killing people since the beginning.
as
of
long as
mankind,
there have been people.
and
Sure.
we are going to destroy this planet eventually.
I believe you. Yes, the end is near, you might say.
As one of Bob's favorite phrases. But no, I disagree with you on what you mean by destroying the planet. We're going to destroy ourselves in the planet. But once we go away, the planet will survive and create new life or whatever. It has done many times.
Well, nature will find a way.
Yeah,
Thank you,
precisely.
Jurassic Park.
I
Yeah.
agree. Precisely. I agree.
Emma, you're quiet over there.
I know,
So
I'm
you
just
think about dinosaurs and the evolution of dinosaurs. So which dinosaurs became horses? And I ask that because you look at hippos are part of the same
No.
family as horses, right?
Yeah,
And they're
dinosaurs did not become horses. Dinosaurs were extinct. The only
well, they're mostly birds and or lizards.
Exactly. The only
Okay,
descendants of dinosaurs are birds. Yeah.
Yeah.
sure. So
But there were prehistoric horses,
there were prehistoric horses.
and they had
But they
fingers.
were mammals. They weren't dinosaurs. They weren't.
Sure, because they
reptiles.
were making cave paintings before people came on the scene.
They were little mice at the time, little rodents at the time.
They did. They had 5 little toes, and they were about that big. And you can still see their toes, which is crazy. But yeah, no, they definitely were around. Their horses now, you were talking about before, look nothing like what actual wild horses looked like when the first humans started domesticating them. They're
Well,
entirely
they had a
different.
mane, they had nostrils, they had hooves.
Yeah, they
Okay.
were very small.
Okay.
They were very stocky. There's, I think,
Plus the tapirs.
Yes. Well, and so the closest version of like prehistoric pre-horses that you can see now are in Mongolia, I believe, and they're those little Mongolian
Sure.
ponies.
So at the same time, we had just gotten past, was that Java man or Australopithecus? So we had evolved as, what are we? We're Homo sapien, Homo whatever the
Homo
fuck we are.
sapiens
Okay.
sapiens.
So we're past that point, but we evolved as they evolved as well, right? And yet at some point we became dominant to them, and I'm just curious how that play took place.
You,
Yeah.
do you think our civilization is evolving?
No, we're currently in
Different
a devolution process right now. We are on the cusp of that abyss, hanging on by our toenails, and
Our civilization is regressing.
we are that. We definitely are that.
I disagree, but I disagree. I'm an optimist.
Well, again, financier, you make money either way, so you're.
as long as war prevails on this globe, we are regressing. The fact that we can't live together in society.
I think it's interesting that the number of viruses that are coming out right now that are crossing species at significant numbers. Even now, of course, the norovirus that's coming out of the oysters from the Gulf of Mexico that are
viruses now that are coming out of the ice age
that have just never been right. Huge factor.
Yeah.
So
we're
really,
we're seeing antibiotics that are no longer effective.
well, that goes back to Vietnam, but yes, of course.
And when the white man arrived in the American continent, more than 60% of the Native Americans, North and South Native Americans, died from two diseases: smallpox and the flu.
Some would tell you that there are no white men. We are shades of beige or brown.
And that's what I mean. When the European arrived, when Cortez.
The Europeans.
When Cortez and.
When the Spartans left Sparta to
Anyway, let's hear our guest here, Emma, because we've been monopolizing the discussion here.
Well, bloviating anyway. I'm sorry.
I do want to note that we are coming up on like the hour mark, just so you know the time.
Ding, 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 ding.
Emma, tell us something.
Tell us something. Well, I think what you were saying before is that the reason that we adjusted is because we evolved them on purpose to fit our needs. And nothing's ever done that besides ourselves. We just had like free reign of how we wanted to develop ourselves. And I feel like animals in the same way would probably revert back to what they used, like dogs, you would probably revert back, or like pigs. I know that if you let a pig loose, like an actual domesticated pig, within one generation, they become feral. So I feel like we decided that evolution, and if we stopped deciding that, it would eventually, at some point, in some of the
Okay, so George Orwell, Animal Farm, and we talked about horses and pigs and dogs, and we're right there, for God's sakes, right?
Napoleon.
Animal Farm, no, it's not about animals. It's about
Stalin and.
Well, we're dystopian, obviously, right? Dystopian as we decide that is, was, or could be. But in the end result, this could all be a parallel universe anyway. And this is all, it's a game of Sims, right?
yeah.
We're a simulation.
All animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others.
Well, that's Cuba.
George Orwell. So, one minor, not objection, clarification maybe, that we did not, in the beginning, we did not consciously went there and said, we're going to domesticate this animal, we're going to change its behavior. We picked up the animal we liked and we killed the animal we didn't like, and as a result, certain traits became. Same thing with vegetables. We picked up grasses and we liked, and then we split the grasses.
Or how about this? We did not have the ability at some point in time where we were to have other people that we could enslave to do our job for us. So rather than finding those people, we didn't have the people, but we had animals, so we then moved them forward to then do those chores. Which China still does today, by the way.
You're saying it wasn't purposeful?
Yes.
It
was accidental.
At the beginning.
Yeah, it became purposeful way after Mendel discovered the laws of genetics and stuff like that. Up until the 17th century, it's accidental. You liked the red flower, so you kept it. You didn't like the blue flower, so whatever, the gray flower, you threw it away. Eventually, all flowers became red because that's the one you kept.
I love the way you threw in Mendel on this conversation.
But it is Mendel. But before Mendel, we didn't know that. Am I right or not?
You are exactly right, but nice transition.
But again, the problem with that is that only the intelligentsia that understands that formulation that takes place there. And other people just go, I like eating red flowers and blue flowers. If you don't understand the selection process, it really doesn't matter to you.
It does. If you like sweet apples, you don't like bitter apples. So bitter apples don't exist anymore.
Granny Smith has been around forever. That's a very tart
that's
apple.
not bitter. Granny tart. I like Granny Smith. What do you think? What most of our grains nowadays develop from grasses. How do they develop from grasses? Did we consciously say, "Oh, we're going to develop a corn, or we're going to"?
No. Now they're all biological.
Yeah, they're artificially created in labs, right?
Now we're intelligently.
Yeah.
Which again ties into the Soylent Green concept, because we have too many people on this rock. We have to find a sustainable form of protein for them, and we have well determined that animal protein by itself does not do it.
Insects. Before we go to humans.
Okay, people are not inclined to eat insects unless they're from the sea. You call them shrimp or lobster or something else.
There we go.
Okay.
No, people are inclined to eat insects. You've been to Mexico and you brought the
Well, you have nothing else to
beautiful,
eat.
tasty.
Sure. So I was in Oaxaca a year ago, and that's what you eat,
We
right?
actually brought locusts from Mexico.
Pretty on the spot.
When we
because
taste
Salient, you might
we
say.
could, we may be down that pike at some point when we run out of agricultural resources.
And you know, the really cool thing about that is that whether you like white meat or dark meat, it's going to be there for you,
It's going to
right?
be a.
As Soylent Green.
It's going to be like a cracker.
Okay. When we the doomsday scenario that we're going to run out of agricultural resources exists as Malthus in the 18th century, and Malthus was proven wrong. Malthus went in and did some calculation and said the human population grows exponentially, whereas the resources grow with our
During the height of the
Exponential
pandemic,
growth is going to provide such a great food source for.
during the height of the last
according to him, yes.
during the height of the last pandemic,
According to him, yes.
which is artificially created, of course, in China, yet again. So at that point, Bill Gates, who is the largest owner of all farmland in the United States,
yes.
said, by the way, I project there's going to be a shortage of food, because he intentionally, as it comes in, surprise, surprise, 2 years after the fact, has decreased the amount of productivity because he's not allowed those people to farm those lands because he has a different end game,
Of course he
ostensibly. Of course he does. So it's just like going to Cuba, where I have some experience, where you have puppet masters. It's not that there's no water or fuel or food or toilet paper. It's like it's on the island, but the puppet masters don't want the people to have it. It's like Soviet Russia years ago.
We are approaching conspiracy theory level.
No.
We are
So
approaching
soon enough,
conspiracy
we
theory
will be
level.
eating our domesticated animals because we don't have food. Look at Europe today, where they don't have any energy source because
But the other
War.
thing we're looking at is a lack of fresh water supply. Look at the West and everything, and how that's going to have an impact.
That is a big issue.
That is going to have a big impact on agriculture and everything else.
and those wild mustangs too.
everything, and it's going to reshape.
Back to the Mustangs.
I mean, even I grew up in the Midwest, and I grew up in a farming town or area. And when I grew up, there was maybe 3 houses on my road, and it's all farmland. And very quickly, Uline has built 4 enormous warehouses that used to be farmland, and all of these places are moving farther past.
Where, by the way, they can process Soylent Green in the very near future.
So this is a very interesting issue. The small time family farmer is dying all over the
Dairy
world.
farming is a non-existent thing.
For lots of reasons, but also Canada anyway. But in general, the small family farmer is dying. Why? Because huge farms are becoming more efficient. Now, again, the counter argument is they're efficient how? By reducing quality.
Well, economies of scale, right? That's universal.
But as a globe, as a whole, what we see is that every time we say food resources will not last, there is a new breakthrough, and you have an exponential growth in food resources. So far, food resources you know, despite what Malthus said in the 18th century, food resources have grown exponentially and have kept up with the growth of the population. And the most important thing is population growth is diminishing. So it is projected now that the Earth will reach a population of about 10 billion. We're now the 8th billion baby was born about a couple of weeks ago. So we're now at the 8 billion. They're projecting the population of the Earth will reach 10 billion, will reduce a little bit and then stabilize right under 10 billion. So the doomsday scenarios are not there.